Ensatina, I believe that's how it's pronounced. I don't know if there are any herpetologists in the room, salamander specialists, but I believe it's Ensatina. Ensatina eschscholtzi, I believe. It's a subspecies, number of subspecies of salamanders that are found in California around the Simi Valley. And of course, here's California again, and you see the coastal range over to the west, and the Sierra Nevada over to the east, and in between those, the Simi Valley. And these salamanders, they like being up in the mountains, they like being up in the forests, and they don't like it in the valley. So they have populated all around this valley. And then what's really interesting is that you've started off with one subspecies here in the south on the coast, and they sort of migrated up north, and then doubled back around and come down on the other side of the valley. There's also a hypothesis that the original species started up in the north and migrated down on both sides, but they're not quite sure. The genetic evidence isn't that clear. So you start off with eschscholtzi and you end up with cloudberry, and these are what they look like. This is eschscholtzi. It's a small, dark brown, salamander. The next one is xanthoptica, and it's got the yellow eyes. That's what makes it a little bit distinct from the eschscholtzi. And then this one is picta, I believe, and the oregoniensis. And you start to see, it's hard to see with this, but you start to see some blotches in the skin, which are picked up a little bit in the next species and become a little bit even more pronounced as you come back down the range. And then finally, cloudberry, it's very, very distinct. And here you can see them all in a big circle. And again, this is a ring species. Any two adjacent species can hybridize, but these last two, the eschscholtzi and the cloudberry, cannot. And so this is really a classic example of a ring species. So, ring species are a very good illustration of speciation in action. It really does seem to be, because if you look at the salamanders, if something was to happen, and let's say there was a drought in North California, and you killed off all the salamanders there, then you really would have two separate species. There'd be no question, because you've cut off that middle part of the ring. So this may be one mechanism by which speciation actually occurs. And this may have happened, Richard Dawkins mentions that this may have happened for human evolution. There may have been a ring species around the Rift Valley in Africa that separated human ancestors from chimpanzee ancestors. It's quite possible. But the problem is that these ring species provide lots of disagreement and frustration for those who wish to categorize them. It's really tricky. Are they different species? The salamanders are considered to be subspecies. The herons are considered to be separate species. But what's the difference? So this brings the problem of species, again, into glaring relief. We're sort of back where we started. And why is this a problem? Why should this be so tricky? Well, Richard Dawkins talks about what he calls the tyranny of the discontinuous mind. And this is basically a manner of thinking that's derived from Platonic philosophy. And it's something that really does sort of come naturally to us. And we have to sort of train our minds not to think like this. Basically, essentialism is what we're talking about. It's derived from Platonism and idealism. And the idea is that there are actual things, like this stand or this microphone, are imperfect versions of some ideal archetype. Like there is some ideal microphone somewhere out in the ether that this is just, a poor reflection of in some way. And so that's the mindset that gets us into thinking about species the way that we do, as really discontinuous units, that things can actually be separated. The idea that each species derives its particular nature from some immaterial essence or speciesness, that a dog is a dog because it derives its dogness from some ideal dog archetype. And so, what is the solution? Well, there really is none. Well, that's not a scientific solution at any rate. I know, it's too bad. As is usually the case in science, a combination of approaches is the best solution we can manage. All the things that I talked about, typology, morphology, sexual isolationism, and phylogeny, those are really the best ways. And we can distinguish a cat from a dog by any of those means. We can show that they're morphologically different, phylogenetically different, all those things. And for things like ring species, well, we just have to realize that, look, it's really not as discontinuous as we might think. And even though we want to characterize things and give things different names, it doesn't really, the species themselves don't really care. The concept of species really is arbitrary in sort of like a cosmic context. The universe doesn't care how we classify things. It's only in a human context that it's meaningful. And that really is the case for most things in science. When we're looking at things, you can say, well, you're just reducing things down to their bare essence, and you're making things meaningless. Well, in a cosmic sense, you are making things sort of meaningless, but that just means that we have to use, our initiative to give things meaning, just like with the problem of species. So that's all I have.